Okay, welcome to the Business and Economic Development Committee. It's Monday morning.
Sorry, they're live.
Oh, we're live.
Our first order of business is that the seated chair for this committee, Councilor Fournier, is unable to attend tonight. So we do need to make a recommendation of who will chair the meeting. So, Councilor Fish?
I would like to recommend Chair Councilor Pelletier to be our chair for this meeting for our business and economic development.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Seeing no opposition, then Council Chair Pelletier, you will.
Do I have to accept the nomination? All right,
Appreciate if you would.
certainly, my pleasure. All right, so, Business and Economic Development Committee, it is 6:37 PM. Around the table, I gotta look at my list and see who's here for this committee. Thank you for saving my life. All right, so on the committee, we have Councilor Fish, Councilor Hawes, Councilor Leonard, who is attending remotely, and Councilor Mallard. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. And first on the agenda tonight, we have the Land Development Code update, changes to land development permit provisions. We are joined by our Economic Development Director, Ann Krieg, and also Planning Director, Officer. Sorry about the promotion, Anya Collette.
Go ahead, Anya.
Okay. So I have a couple items to read tonight. The first one is about our land development permit, some provisions in there. The first aspect of that, is about extensions of land development permits. The current rule is that, anybody can request an extension, if they apply before it expires, and they also get 2 extensions. I just want to back up. Land development permits last for 2 years. They have to complete before then, unless they get an extension. So we don't have a cutout for if they, are just past that deadline. Then they have to go back to the planning board, even if nothing's changed and the land development code hasn't changed. So what we're asking is that we extend that to 90 days if you apply within 90 days of your expiration. And nothing has changed in your plans and nothing's changed in the code, that it would then be minor site plan revision, which is just staff review. And that would really reduce burdens for the applicant and also for staff, since there's been no changes. We do propose keeping the limit of 2 extensions, just so we don't have infinitely open land development permits. And then also subdivisions would need to go back to the planning board because they have to get their plan endorsed. So that's really the gist of that first item. Want to get any thoughts on that?
Thank you. Councilor Fish?
I wondered why 90 days. Was there a reason for it that they could come in within 90 days?
We kind of just chose 90 days. It sounded reasonable. If you have other suggestions, I'm happy to.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
Councilor Mallard?
I'm just a little confused why, when someone goes into this knowing what the requirements are, now we're changing it. If they didn't do it in the 2-year time period, then what makes you think the 90 days is gonna help them? Do you think they wake up after 2 years and say, oh, I screwed up and I've gotta go back? I don't think so. I think this is an unnecessary change.
I mean, we do tell them upfront that it will expire in 2 years. But I think some people maybe get to that point and they don't realize they have to apply before it expires and not after, so.
There aren't many things you apply for after they expire. I mean, I just think you can't take them by the hand forever. These people, it's a big project. I think they would be smart enough to know they have 2 years.
Thank you, Councilor Mallard. Councilor Leonard?
Yeah, so I guess I'm going to have to disagree with you, Wayne. Sorry. I do like the 90-day window. I think it makes things a bit flexible for people. I do have a question on one thing that you illuminated earlier, or I'm sorry, not earlier, in the note. So it's a process to allow the planning board to evaluate the reapproval through a minor subdivision process as opposed to a major subdivision process. So and please correct me if I'm reading this wrong. So it seems to me that the only change for that would be for the reapproval process is that you go from 2 meetings with the planning board to 1 meeting to the planning board. Is this just being done to help facilitate the process of already known information that the planning board has, and it just reduces one additional meeting that they have, or are or is there something else regarding and please correct me if I'm wrong about this. If a major subdivision is getting going through a reapproval process, do they go through the minor subdivision process afterwards?
Yeah, I should have pointed that one out too. So if it was a major subdivision and they did expire, they could go through minor subdivision, which would be the 1 meeting. And there is a reduced fee because we don't have to advertise with minor subdivision. So that would be another difference.
Yeah, no, that answers my question. I just have a follow-up question, which is there like I'm seeing the positive rational reasons as to why are we, for example, with reducing the meeting for a major subdivision, would we be able, like, are we, for example, not allowing people another time to speak their opinion on a subdivision by removing 1 meeting time, especially if it's a major subdivision going through the minor subdivision process through a reapproval? I don't know what the correct answer is, but I'm just this seems like a little bit of a it just doesn't completely sit right with me, but I get why you're doing it, or why this is being suggested. It's anyway, I just want to elaborate on that further. If like there's any issues of going from treating a major subdivision to a minor subdivision during the reapproval process, is there anything else that we're eliminating from that besides the 1 extra meeting?
So with preliminary subdivision, or I mean, major subdivision, at the first meeting, it's when they approved the preliminary subdivision, which is the bulk of the subdivision requirements. And a lot of the meatier aspects of the code. When they come back for final, it's really just to kind of formalize what was approved in the preliminary, along with adding any conditions the planning board might have wanted previously. And then also talking about things like, you know, the HOA and things of that nature. So there's just a lot less involved with the final subdivision piece of it. But if council does not feel comfortable with doing that, you know, we can make them go back through the major subdivision process. But
I mean, you answered all my questions, so I'm totally fine. I just wanted to make sure that this was going through the right process. So as long as the planning board seems to be okay with it, as long as it makes everyone's lives easier for the administrative purposes of going through this, completely fine. I just wanted to make sure that we were crossing off our I's and dotting our T's. Reverse that.
yeah, and just want to clarify too, the same as with regular land development permits, this would be where the plan has not changed and code hasn't changed and anything of that nature.
And if I can add to that, the statute requires that the subdivision plan be endorsed. So otherwise, you know, you could do it administratively, but an extension that is. So that's why it has to go back to planning board, because they have to re-sign the drawing for it to go back to the registry.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this item?
And just want to clarify, I haven't taken this to the planning board yet, but I will bring it to them, so.
Do you need a motion?
I haven't quite finished this item, but when I do, I will need a motion.
Okay.
So,
So has planning board had any input on this revision yet?
not yet, but I will take this to them as well.
Thank you.
It's usually been our practice to bring it to council first and then planning board, so. The second aspect of this was to, anytime somebody applies for a land development permit, if they have outstanding code violations on that property or another property, that, they're not able to go through with the land development permit, and that would just assist with enforcing the codes. That is a common provision in many other communities. Some communities also require that back taxes be paid. I just want to put that out there in case that's something council does want. And I'm happy to hear any thoughts or concerns on that.
Counselor Fish?
So if a developer or there's a project before a permit is issued, if there's any other outstanding violations, a permit will not be granted until the other even if it's on a different project or a different property altogether.
Correct. Unless you all feel we should do that differently.
I just would hate to see, I just think it might be a different scenario. I'm just trying to think of scenarios. If there's an argument or something that's being debated with a project over here, I would hate to see somebody move forward on another project, handicapped on another project that has nothing to do, you know, with the project over here. Just I'm interested to see what other councilors have to say.
I'm actually in favor of that provision. Counselor Leonard, did you have something to add?
This provision, I think, is a economically responsible and conservative thing to take into approach. I don't think it's a good idea to allow people who are already having some issues with other finances to then allow them to continue to engage in projects unabridged in the area.
Thank you. Other discussion?
Is that a majority opinion? Just want to know where I'm stand.
Yeah, do we need a motion on this?
Do you want the motion though on the whole? Don't you have one more?
Yeah, I was
section of
gonna
this?
talk about one more thing.
She wanted it on the
Some
whole
direction.
number one.
I was just hoping for direction on that piece of it. in
Okay.
particular.
I think you had the majority of.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So, the last thing I wanted to, talk about was for issuing certificates of occupancy for land development permits, particularly for more phased type developments like attached residential, and some multifamily developments, and some others. We are proposing that applicants provide a phasing plan for their work to show when they're gonna do various site improvements like plantings, before they occupy that phase. And that would really help clarify the meaning of issuing certificates of occupancy, because it's not exactly clear in the code. So.
Comments on that? Counselor Fish?
I'm fine with the first and the last, but I still have a problem with the middle one because I just think that if there's a conflict, and I just know a lot of developers or investors in town that go through and they think code is fine, only later to find out when they're trying to get their certificate of occupancy, something new has cropped up. And I agree that, you know, on the face of it, if you just want to look at what's black and white, if they have violations and they have a habit or a history of it, and they're trying to just want to continue with that behavior, I see where this would prevent it. But I can also see with it, the way it's written, possibly coming back in the future and kind of being, you know, maybe it was reworded a little bit, but I just would hate to see, you know, a lot of things get debated, you know, every day we're getting calls, or I do because I'm in the real estate community, of people that are looking for their certificate of occupancy only to find out on that day, there's a new thing that came up that wasn't there before. So I just, you know, and if they get counsel and attorneys are involved and it's outside, it's being debated, you know, whether right, wrong, or indifferent, but it's out there being debated for a professional legal opinion. I would just hate to see this rule applied and it's the rule.
I don't know if it really speaks to your concern as much, but I don't know if it would make you feel better if we limit it to land development code violations, but it would still apply to other properties.
That would make sense. That would make sense.
Okay.
We'll look at it further for sure.
Okay, thank you.
And I do need a motion on that whole thing.
With the changes that have been discussed, I would move that it, that it go forward to, council for settling there.
I second.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Question, I think it has to go back to planning before we do.
Well, she will automatically take it to
So we
planning.
can't send it forward until we get it back from planning.
It's a
because we don't know.
recommendation.
So we would take the official language.
Mhm.
So I'll talk to them about this generally, but then we would have official language that would go to planning board and then they would go to council for final approval.
Or, you know,
For first reading.
For first, yeah, well, first reading and then planning board and then second reading.
Mm.
Yeah.
He's asking if we're going to see it again
yeah,
after you take it to planning board.
if I have to approve it, I'd like
If
to see
we
it.
can,
Yeah, so let me clarify. So I'm taking just this draft proposal to planning board tomorrow to talk about it with them. And then we would make actual language. And then it would go to council for first reading and then planning board and then council again for second reading.
So we're not gonna see it until it goes to council for the first reading, right?
Yes,
Typical way we do it.
yes,
Okay, just checking.
yep,
but we do see them.
I like more time to digest things.
Well, the first reading and second reading are typically at least 2 weeks apart, if not further,
Yes.
so there is still time to make adjustments.
Second item is about consideration for allowing, us to have consent agreements for code violations. And this would not just be limited to land development, but also historic preservation, short-term rentals, any other place where we have, a section about violation of the code. And this allowance would be really useful because it would help us kind of enforce code before we get to the point of taking it to court, or at least preventing us from taking it to court, which would really alleviate a lot of staff burden, and time. And many other communities do have this type of allowance. I listed a few, like Bar Harbor, Boothbay, and Ellsworth. We also allow this for the vacant property ordinance. So what we're proposing is to take what we have in vacant property or property maintenance ordinance, put that in the general enforcement section of the code, and then we would just refer back to that in all these different sections like land development. And then just for the specific language on that, it would allow the, and basically economic development director to sign those consent agreements on behalf of the city. And if not her, it would be the city solicitor and or the city manager.
Thank you. Questions or discussion on this item? I don't see any objection.
I think I do need a motion on that as well to bring language forward.
We have a motion on this item?
Second,
That would be the first.
Yep, that's a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Can I ask one simple question, or simple to me, may not be a simple question. I'm curious about the current, you're allowed to violations on property maintenance. What are the historic preservation, the difference between? I'm just,
On
Yes.
violations?
yeah,
Um,
what are the violations for historic preservation that wouldn't fall under a normal building?
I think that the violation section is pretty typical, but all this would be doing would be allowing us to pursue those code violations with a consent agreement rather than taking them to court if they violated the code. We could still take them to court, but this would be the first step.
What's our practice been on property maintenance violations?
I think it relies on court action, but that's,
But you indicate here that we already have consent agreements for that, don't you?
for property maintenance.
Right, so what have we been doing for property maintenance?
We
ordinances?
try to work with the property owner. I mean, that's the whole point of the consent agreement, is it's sort of a in-between stage of trying to work with the owner to get to compliance.
Give me an example, I see a building on, State, State Street Hill. It's been derelict for 20 years since I've lived here. Have we had a consent agreement with them?
No, because we're not empowered to, that's what this is.
But I thought you just told me it was empowered to, a property maintenance ordinance.
For property maintenance, yeah.
That is property maintenance, isn't it?
For that particular one, I'd have to look at that particular case.
I just question what we've been doing already for this, if we've been doing anything. It just, to change things just because we want to include more, if we haven't been doing, if we haven't had the teeth to do anything anyway, it doesn't make much sense.
Well, we've been, staff has been taking a look at our processes to, try to create an environment where we're trying to work with the business community, work with property owners to get compliance, and to avoid court if possible.
Well, I guess my question is, how many have we, and that's all I ask is, how many have we done in the past 5 years?
I don't know that.
Have we done any?
I'd have to look. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't like having things come up that really aren't valuable if we're not utilizing them. And it would appear to me that we don't utilize it, but that's just me.
We have a motion. We have a second. Do we need a roll call vote on this?
I believe we're required to have roll call if we have.
That's
someone
right. If you have
Zoom,
somebody on
Zoom.
Zoom. Yeah, he's, sorry, on the committee.
Thank you. We'll do a roll call vote. Counselor Leonard,
Yes.
Counselor Hawes,
Yes.
Counselor Fish,
Yes.
Counselor Mellor,
No,
and I'm a yes. Thank you.
The third item is consideration of changes to parking setback requirements. Currently in the land development code for off-street parking, we require setbacks for almost every parking lot. Except that there was this cutout, and it's not clear why it was there for parking lots below 50 spaces in URD one and UID. So for every other urban zone, we require a setback of 6 feet on the front and then 5 feet on the side. So we're proposing to make that the same for URD one and UID. Because there are some negative impacts with having parking right up to a property line in the urban residential zones. And then also, we're proposing to clarify the buffer requirements for URD one, for parking lots that are between 5 and 10 spaces. A lot of times, outside of the urban areas, it requires a C buffer when a parking lot is adjacent to residential or some other zones. But there's a cutout for some of the urban residential zones like URD two and MNSD, where that can go down to an A buffer, which is between 6 to 10 feet and requires just a few less shrubs and trees per 100 feet. So we're proposing to make that the same for URD one, because otherwise they would need a C buffer as well, which is roughly 20 to 25 feet, which would be way more than the setback we're proposing, which would be 5 feet. Another issue with that is that if you did require a C buffer, a lot of these lots in URD one and URD two are very small and sometimes they have weird layouts. So it would really make it infeasible to have parking in those lots, if you had a C buffer. And also, I think it's important to clarify about the buffer requirement, just because there was no setback stipulation before in URD one, and it wasn't mentioned in the buffer requirements. I think people probably thought you didn't need a buffer, so I think it's important that we clarify that. So that's all I had to say about that particular issue. I do just want to clarify too, that in URD one, this would only apply mostly to multi-unit properties, since up to 4 units can be placed on large enough size lots in URD one, and we require 1 space per dwelling unit. But it would not apply to driveways, because driveways are exempt in the code from setback and buffer requirements. So.
Thank you. I think we have at least one person in the room who wants to give public comment on this issue.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, you can approach, please come to the table, state your name and whether you're a resident of Bangor, and you have 3 minutes.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Carol Cutting. Good. it's a speech problem because I have Tourette's, bear with me. I sent you folks, a late memo. Did anybody receive it?
I did.
You did?
Yes.
Did you folks? I don't know if you got it, Wayne. Yeah, basically, the proposals, there is no setback, as Anya said, that's apparently left out. However, the 5-foot setback, I have been dealing with a problem with this for a long time. About 4 years, I went away, my neighbor put a property in, and this is what my yard looked like before, this is the tree, and this is, I put a fence there because they were having syringes thrown over the fence. Can you see, it's in your email too. Yeah. So, they end up having 4 cars parked along this fence, and these cars are actually 6 feet away, which is more than the 5-foot setback that is being requested. And what's being proposed, and if you're living with my picnic table, this is my only grass area, you have cars 5 foot from the fence pulling in and out, up to 4 cars. It's incredibly disruptive. It's hard to enjoy your neighborhood, especially because they come and go. And behind here is another parking lot that can also have 4 cars because it's a different property. So my first thing is that the setback is good to have something there. However, it makes no difference if you can see this picture, and the fence has to come down because it scares me when people pull in anyways. That is not very far back. And it should, I'm questioning that it be specifically the cars parked parallel, because that's much less invasive than 4 cars parking right along the property line, right through here. Secondly, with the change in the zoning code, what you're doing is you're proposing to go from a 20 to 25-foot setback from the fence, which is the border where they can park, to a 6 to 10-foot fence. So basically, 6 foot, 10-foot shrubberies and assorted shrubberies and stuff like that. So basically, these cars could be like around here now, because we're all 6 feet away, and you can add 6 more. So all along there, I can have 6 cars facing me behind my fence. That is not conducted to any kind of neighborhood, and this happens all through Bangor and USRD1 area in Bangor. If they're parked parallel, it would be different. Oh, and also back here, because it's a different property, they can also have 6 more cars if they plant assorted shrubbery and stuff like that. So within 56 feet of my house, I can have 10 cars facing me. That is an awful lot for residential property. But in addition, the extra parking lot is not really needed because the city has allowed on-street parking now. And also, if the cars can't fit in the area because they have to be 20 feet back, maybe they should not be there. If the narrow roads, if the properties are that narrow, maybe you shouldn't be shoving 10 cars in there. It's just really incredible, disruptive. So I guess I would say I'm for some kind of setback, but if you could add it be parallel, and if you could also add it be parallel retroactive, because I've been dealing with this since 2020 when I moved back in from vacation, and the cars were this there. I tried to work with the landlord, it didn't work. This landlord in back happens to own 4 LLCs with 45 properties and brings in over 1.5 to $2 million a year. I found sponges in my yard for my dog, from October to February of a year ago. There was a woman smoking crack or something, a bong on the back porch, puking over the side. People are afraid to call the cops. The landlord I tried to negotiate with, they refused to talk to me. So I'm dealing with this. So I feel it's disruptive for all properties in Bangor, which is being proposed for, especially the changing of the code from a C buffer yard to an A buffer yard. That's really destruction of local residential properties for the benefit of apartments, which don't need it because they can park on the road.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to offer public comment on this? Questions and discussion from the committee? Councillor Fish?
Do we have, so we're just looking to create an ordinance on, 2 of these, areas that had nothing before, just to make sure we have some guidance.
Right.
Do we know, how many residential properties this might affect where there be that many more, parking spots and letting them.
So it would just be with new parking. And we would primarily see this come into play when somebody is proposing 3 or more units, because that's when it would come to our attention. Well, if they also needed a building permit, we would also address it then, and if they're proposing a parking lot. So I don't have an exact number for you, but it wouldn't apply, we couldn't apply it really to already existing lots.
Okay, so it's just moving forward.
Yeah, and I will point out too that it is pretty unlikely to have a parking lot with more than 8 spaces in URD one, since we only do allow up to 4 units, and that's with a really large lot. And since the minimum requirement is just 1 space per unit, so I do think it's unlikely you'll see larger parking lots.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or discussion from the committee? Yes,
Can
Councilor
you give
Dean.
examples of neighborhoods that are URD one, just so I can kind of visualize where these parking
Yeah,
spaces are?
so a large portion of Fairmount that is more north of the school, northwest of the school. I think I'm maybe getting that wrong, but west, sorry, west of the school. Going up towards I-95, and then the area around West Broadway, and then Tree Streets. There's some of that, a lot of that is mixed in with URD two, but you get much more URD one as you're going further up towards I-95. So those would be the main places, and then Little City also, again, as you're going out towards I-95. You get more of a mix of URD one and URD two as you get closer.
The reason I'm asking is the lots are very small, so I'm just surprised you could actually put a parking lot in one of those
Yeah,
places.
I
And
mean,
that
it-
might be a bit too congested.
Right, so it does get murky, the line between what is a driveway and what is a parking lot. Because a lot of what you see in these areas are smaller, like 2 to 3 units, and they may not have like a full-blown parking lot. I think you would only see this come into play if you did have a larger lot that did allow more units. And I can't remember the other thing I was gonna mention.
Are there specs to say how much green space
Yes,
to the parking?
yes, that was the other thing I was gonna mention. We do have a maximum impervious surface ratio. So, in URD one, I think it's 80 to 85% is the maximum. So you have to have at least 15 to 20% of the lot be open space. And then the buffer, again, that would be part of your greenery that you're adding. Now, that would only apply to lots that are more than 5 spaces. If you have fewer than 5 spaces, we don't require a buffer, so.
Is there a motion on this item?
No, let me ask a question. So if we have a URD 1 or 2, or is it just for 1?
This would be for 1.
Okay. But if you had a URD 1, I'm trying to think, our neighborhood has very small lots. So, and we have the ability to rent 1 space out. I mean, we have a maid's quarters, and that's we're allowed. So I'm not sure on one of our lots, I'm not sure we'd have enough room to put parking anyway.
Yeah,
And we have that issue, we've had that issue across the street, there's a URD 2 with 2-car parking, and they end up parking 4 there, and we've never been able to straighten that out. Yeah, I guess it's fine, but I'm changing from URD 1 to 2 sometimes and if there were any federal funding in any of the apartments, like if it was a rehab, they are required to have 1.5 spaces, aren't they?
not that I know of. They just stick to our ordinance of 1.
I believe if you check the federal guidelines, if there's federal money involved, it's 1.5.
That would be interesting.
Is there a motion on this item?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion. We have a second. Any additional discussion?
think it would have been helpful, I think we do have to have some regulations, and I think the ones that are existing, they're grandfathered, so again, this would just be moving forward, correct? Correct.
Yep.
So, I guess this makes sense, but I think if we'd had a visual of the neighborhoods, maybe colored, just so we could have some idea of how many people, individual residences that are abutting where this would affect, that would have been helpful, but.
Yeah, if the committee wants us to bring back more information,
Yeah.
I mean, you can table it, you can do that. If that's helpful.
Right now, we have a motion and a second.
The maker of the motion would have to withdraw if that was their wish.
Correct.
In order to bring it back for more information.
Is that what the committee wants to do?
Kind of getting a sense that that might be where they're headed.
All right, I rescind my motion.
I will rescind my second.
Thank you. So we'd like some additional information on the neighborhoods that will be impacted.
Okay, just to clarify what that looks like, you want to see, basically the URD1
Yeah.
zones?
Yeah,
Okay,
and in the areas that could be affected by this.
okay.
Some examples, some,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And I feel good that it's moving forward, so at least what's existing now would be grandfathered, so that's good, but it would just give me a better perception of what's really gonna be affected.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Anya?
That's all.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up on the agenda, we have the airport director report. I assume we're going to be, here he comes, joined by Director Jose Saavedra.
Do you need the computer?
I don't think so. I
Okay,
think-
I didn't know if you were doing a shared screen.
Councilor Leonard, do you have a question?
Yes, I actually wanted to, before we get into the report, I did want to get a question that we punted over to BED that I had for Director Saavedra regarding the potential dissolution fully of the airport committee. I just have three questions for you, Director, and it's okay if you have broad answers, but I'm trying to illuminate here what direction we as a council should be going here. So my first question is, how would the airport benefit by not having a council committee to report to and being under the lens of BED?
I'm sorry, Councilor Leonard. So just to clarify, that's the situation today. We do not have an airport committee today.
I understand. I'm asking the Director Saavedra what the benefits of that current system is and juxtapose that to having an actual committee that that is specifically for the airport. Again, I'm trying to figure out here, is it more beneficial to having the airport, one of the largest bodies of our city, under BED, or is it more appropriate to have the airport have its own committee so that we can ascertain more accurately what are things that need to be discussed regarding airport related activities and issues? Because it's a very large beast, and I don't actually think we're going to be able to get the entirety of issues that are prevalent to the Bangor Airport without having its own committee. That's my analysis of how I see this right now. I don't really see the airport being able to fully divulge all the information and data that it would want to give the council and to the citizens under just BED. Like no offense to BED, but the airport's just a very, very large body that I feel is not going to be helped confined in this area that also has a multitude of other different city related departments and employees to work with. And I mean, to just right off the top of my head, I can't remember the exact number, but I mean, how many unions do we have embedded in the airport? I mean, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's a significant amount that I would assume would require this department to have its own council committee. And my thought was going to this model of having airport be in BED was a temporary thing. I didn't realize it was going to be completely fixed out. I don't see this as a very good approach to how we conduct meetings regarding the airport, especially considering a lot of the issues that we have been receiving from the airport, but by no means Jose's problem. Not trying to pin that on you, but I think it would be helpful to have more conversation between the staff that is that's on the ground at the airport, and making sure that council and the public is well aware of what is going on, especially considering a lot of the input that citizens have reached out to me personally regarding some of the FAA safety issues, which I'm not going to steal your thunder, Jose. I really appreciate the work that you did in your assessment on that. But I think this warrants a much larger discussion, because I know Jose can't necessarily speak entirely for the airport at this point, but I don't see this as a really good strategy to disconnect council from the largest body that we have in our municipality.
Thank you, Councilor Leonard. We're joined at the table by the city manager, Deb Laurie.
Yeah, and I just wanted to provide some context because I can see Jose going, what? So Jose was never here when we had a separate airport committee.
Right.
So I think the question to Jose is, have you not had, or have you felt you've had limited opportunity to update the council on areas of importance? And I think, to me, that's the question, and I would like to think if he did, he would have been saying to me, I need to be on the committee every week. So I would also say that, yes, the airport is a very important economic development tool. His staff and Ann's staff work collaboratively on a lot of economic development items, which is one of the synergies that exists here. And I will also say that, yes, they have a fairly substantial budget, but so does public safety. So if you all want to relook at how you define committees, we're happy to do that. But I think we should do it in its entirety, would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
So there's quite a bit of things that I could comment. My role, obviously, as airport director, is to provide the council with, and the committee with any information both on the day-to-day operational needs of the airport, and provide the execution part of your guidance on whatever strategic direction you would like to see. Embedded in all of that is the guidance that I received from you, correct? So if there is areas that the committee would like to see more, or that it feels that it has not received the necessary information or feedback from what is happening at the airport, I would be more than happy to take note of that and then build that into a more robust report. Like Debbie already mentioned, by the time I took the leadership of the airport, this was the setup that I walked into. So I would be happy to look into additional information that might help better illuminate whatever conversations need to happen from the committee or the council in that regard. And I'm happy to go into anything else that might be deemed necessary.
Counselor House?
I think it would be more, unfortunately, it would be more time consuming for you. But if our updates did delve into the projects, when we had the huge runway project, when we were looking at adding the additional gates and all of that. So, and just looking at your master plan, that was something that the committee used to spend a great deal of time looking at, asking you questions, getting your feedback. The rest of the council would have their feedback. So from that perspective, I think the committee had merit. Towards the end, it was difficult because we were doing, before you arrived, we were doing the updates just to get the ridership stats and, you know, what are the loads and how much is the fuel and what are we selling and what are we getting, those kinds of things. But certainly if we had an airport committee that met at least once a month or twice a month, depending on how much we had. I mean, I don't want to have a meeting just to say we had a meeting. But if we can really delve into some of the new trends that are going to be coming up here, things you're going to be running into with the federal aviation side, I can see merit to that. But I think you still would need to have some connection where you did an update to BED because of the crossover that you have with this committee. So you can't, I don't know that we can pull them apart and never have them meet again. But I see value in the committee itself and then coming here as well for the updates. And I'm sorry, I just took some of your time right out of your calendar with that idea, but it does provide more opportunities. Uh-oh.
And no,
Here's
I was
the
just gonna say, we'll bring all of the committee stuff back to a workshop.
Thank
So
you.
that you can
Yeah.
all talk about kind of, I mean, we revisit this on a fairly regular basis and that's
Mhm.
perfectly fine. So instead of doing it piecemeal, let's have it come back as an entire discussion.
That would work.
Okay?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is part of the reason we moved airport under BED was to consolidate committees into one night a week. Because especially during budget season, there were weeks where people were having to be here 3 nights a week. And that's very difficult for the full council to do for multiple months at a time. So just something to consider. But yes, thank you. Let's bring that back and have a discussion as a full council.
Sure.
Appreciate that. And Councilor Leonard, thank you for the question. Ready for your report?
If there's not any more questions?
Let's do it.
Yes. Great, so today I have a report with 4 main items. A lot of great updates for the committee and the council. First off, late last week, we did get confirmation from Delta Airlines that they will be bringing in a seasonal service connecting Bangor to Detroit this summer. Similar to the Atlanta service that I shared with you a couple months back. So that's again something additional for this season as we obviously going to a busy summer. As far as the next section of my report, I believe that came at the request of Councilmember Leonard on a overview of aviation safety, and I tried to gather as much information as I could with regards to what are the safety initiatives that we have in place and programs that we have in place at the airport. And before I go into a little bit of deeper detail into those different items, I think that obviously we've seen a number of different incidents across the industry that have led many people to question the safety of the aviation system and whether or not flying is safe. And the data and the statistics continue to back aviation and flying as the safest mode of transportation. So one of the things, and I wanted to note this on the second page, is that safety is one of our top priorities. Safety is not the number one priority, because if safety was the top priority, we wouldn't be sending tubes of metal into the sky. So it's a balance that goes into analyzing the risk and the benefit of the aviation system. But having said that, there's a number of different things that we have in place, and that the aviation system here in the United States is one of the safest systems in the world. The airport, in and of itself, we have an airport emergency plan that is part of a required certification that addresses how the airport sets a framework for how the airport would respond to minor and major emergencies. And really, it's not a one size fits all. It's more of a general approach, because no one emergency is going to be the same. There's going to be different challenges that we're going to encounter in any emergency situation that we have at the airport, and the framework that we have in place and the plan allows for that flexibility. And that is also built into the training that our employees get. I've probably seen many airport employees with their badge. There's this number of different trainings that every airport employee has to complete in terms of security, in terms of emergency, in terms of best practices, and help them respond to really anything that they could encounter, or at least know where to get the resources that they would need. As part of the certification that the airport has on a yearly basis, we perform a variety of exercises that are meant to test the response of airport personnel, of our mutual aid partners, including the fire department here in Bangor, the Air National Guard, and any other agencies that would respond to any of our emergencies at the airport. And one of the things that was recently added into that plan is a water rescue plan that was not part of the requirements that we have in place. The importance of that was further highlighted by the recent accident that happened in DC. It's something that the FAA had been working for a while, but it was not a requirement. Obviously, with the accident, that became a lot more urgent for us to look at what that would entail. And as of earlier today, we did finalize our plan on the water rescue plan. And looking at the bigger picture, I think one of the things that we see in the aviation industry is a lot of a piecemeal approach to addressing many issues. And so one of the new things that is coming from the ICAO mode of operations is to look at the Safety Management Systems program, which is a much more holistic approach on how we look at safety issues, risk, and a number of different factors that play into how to operate in a safe environment. And so late last year, we sent a couple of airport employees and city employees to a week-long training down in Florida that helped them learn more about what it would entail to launch a safety management systems program here at the airport. And then that was followed by a visit down to the jet board in Portland, so that they would learn from the system that they had in place. And the reason why Portland had their safety management systems in place was because they do have a different configuration than the one we have here, and they had run into some severe safety issues on a regular basis. And so by us reaching out to Portland, that really provided us with an opportunity to ask a lot of questions of the program that's in place, and better understand how we can tailor that a SMS program here at Bangor. And lastly, I believe that as industry professionals, the management team at the airport remains highly engaged in our trade associations to make sure that we're up to date on any different trends or programs that are available for us to help us do our job better and address any needs that might need attention at the airport. So part of the discussion that we were having a little bit earlier, I've been at the airport for 14 months. And so the data that I can track in the last year or so, and we're able to compare and contrast some of the reporting, we see a general positive trends in the number of accidents, the reporting system that we have, and all of those things point again to an overall positive safety culture that we have at the airport. Is it perfect? No. We always have room for improvement, and there's always things that we can do better to make sure that we're running a safe airport. Does that answer the general guidelines that the committee wanted to see from the request of the safety briefing?
I think that's very good. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, so moving on from the safety discussion, I wanted to bring to this report and add to this to the report the statistics for the months of December and January, which show record-breaking operations once again. And it, in addition to the obviously very positive numbers that we're seeing, a number that's not included in this report is that the parking numbers for February, once again, breaking 23%, or an increase of 23% compared to the last February. As a whole, 2024 was a record-breaking year for us. Despite the runway closures that we saw earlier in the year, we were able to see an increase of 5% in terms of traffic operations at the airport. So very, very strong numbers for the airport. And that kind of transitions into the last item that I added to this report, which it had been several years since the airport had really put together an annual report that captured all of the accomplishments, all of the things that we did as a team and things that we accomplished. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to share with you some of those highlights. We've stayed very, very busy at the airport throughout the year. And this is a great tool for us to kind of capture that and help us illustrate, again, the hard work that the airport staff is doing. And that, of course, sometimes we don't get to see that as much as we probably would if there was a airport committee. But again, it does highlight some of the things, including all of the accomplishments with the first year of construction, with the runway, the impressive project that we did with the new parking lot. That is something that approximately a year ago we started having those initial discussions, and that carry out throughout the entire year, so that by the holiday season, we would have the parking lot. That has been of tremendous help. And as of the last couple of weeks, we even had to reactivate the old shuttle lot. So again, it speaks to the need of the infrastructure needs that we have at the airport, and that we appreciate the support that the committee and the council provides for us. So I'm happy to answer any questions or dig a little deeper into anything that is captured in the report, in the annual report, in my report, or any other questions.
Councilor Dean?
The new parking lot obviously is generating revenue.
Yes.
Have you kept the parking per day, per week, whatever the same, or has that amount gone up with the new addition?
It has been adjusted so that it's somewhere in the neighborhood between the short-term parking and the shuttle.
Other questions or comments? Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sad
that's
that
awesome.
Counselor Beck isn't here because he's been advocating for us to do annual reports for like the last 2 years. Just from my perspective, I thoroughly enjoyed reading through the report and seeing the highlights of the last year. Anyone who knows me knows I cannot stop talking about our airport and how awesome it is. I did have an opportunity to fly out a few weeks ago, used the new lot. The shuttle system was fast. The QR code to get out of the gate was fast on the way out, and the shuttle driver was super friendly. I was just really, really impressed. I think our airport continues to punch above its weight in terms of professionalism and the opportunity and the connectivity that it provides to the region. So thank you for the report. It was really fun to read through.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jose. Appreciate you.
Quick questions. I'm excited that we've added some, short stints from Bangor to Atlanta, Bangor to Detroit. Why do we still not have Bangor to Boston?
So
That's a loaded question.
one of the, obviously, we continue to have conversations with all the airlines anytime we can to try to expand service. One of the things that we keep on, that as we're going through the discussions about routes, is that still we're dealing with a shortage of aircraft, a shortage of pilots. And when an airline is looking at what the best allocation of their routes is, then we're competing with similar programs. So it might be a situation in which they really want to provide that service, and I would venture to say that that is probably a competitive market that would do very well. I'm not sure that there's anything on our end that I'm sure we can do something that would entice them to move on that general direction and establish that route. Sometimes we're dealing with constraints on their end as well. So it's a matter of a airline being able to support that and having the proper equipment and resources. But obviously, we're always happy to have those conversations with their partners.
I can chime in on that. A few years ago, Delta did try that. They had one flight a day. It left Bangor at like 5:30 a.m., got you in Boston by 6:30 or 7. And then they had one return flight at like 11 o'clock at night. And I think the idea was that it would connect people with all the flights going across the country. I remember because I was working in Boston at the time, and I was like, boy, would that be really nice to be able to just, not have to drive 4 hours each way. But I think they found it was just not lucrative enough for them. There was not enough passenger load to make it worthwhile.
It would have to be, just to add to your point, it would have to be an airline that has a large presence in Boston. So we would be looking at very few airlines that would be able to support that. I haven't done it full, and I don't have the information right in front of me, but I would imagine it would be something along the lines of Delta or JetBlue that would be the prime airlines for that type of operation. We are looking at doing a study that would help us identify what the traveling public is really looking for and what are the best routes that we're able to bring to our industry shows where we have this kind of conversations with the airlines, and that's going to be an exercise that we'll be doing in the coming weeks and months.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions for Director Saavedra? Okay, thank you very much. We will move on to dangerous building updates.
Yes, we're gonna have our Assistant City Solicitor, Grace, come to the table to go over the statute requirements. Again, we've been trying to refresh and the processes that we use to address situations in all of our divisions, and this was one that Grace has taken on with Brenda, so.
Yeah, so unfortunately, my memo to you guys did not make it into the packet, so I'm just gonna try to give a broad view of the dangerous building process as permitted by state law. So in order to be considered a dangerous building, the council must find that the building fits into one or more of these 7 categories. So it has to be structurally unsafe, unstable, unsanitary, constitute a fire hazard, is unsuitable or improper for the use or occupancy for which it is put, constitutes a hazard to health or safety because of inadequate maintenance, obsolescence, or abandonment, or is otherwise dangerous to life or property. So there's an 8-step process and I'm gonna try to make it as not confusing as possible, but if you have any questions, please stop me or you can wait till the end. So first, the code enforcement officer will identify a dangerous building, secure the building and serve the owners and interested parties with notice that the building has been secured. Then a public hearing will be scheduled where the city will have the opportunity to present evidence that the building is dangerous and fits into one of the above categories, and the owner will have the opportunity to rebut the assertion that the building is dangerous. So the code enforcement officer, fire department, or other enforcement authorities will inspect the building and prepare an inspection report. Then the council will hold a public hearing where the code enforcement officer, fire department, and possibly other city representatives will present the city's position. The owners and other parties in interest will have the opportunity to testify and rebut the city's position. Then the council will deliberate and determine whether the building is dangerous or a nuisance. And then we'll sign an order determining whether the building is dangerous and outlining any corrective actions that must be taken. If the owners or interested parties have shown a willingness to demolish or repair the building to the satisfaction of council, the council may allow for the delay of the disposal of the building. The owners or other interested parties will be given 30 days to demolish or repair the building in accordance with the council's order. Then the signed order will be recorded in the registry of deeds. And then that signed order will also be served on the owners or other parties in interest. And should the owners or interested parties fail to comply with the council's order, the city manager may act to demolish the building. And then we will be itemizing all expenses throughout that time. And then we can assess a special tax against the land on which the building was situated to get those costs back. So tonight we're between steps 1 and 2, so we're at the very beginning. So we have identified a few dangerous buildings, which Brenda will cover. And 2 of those 3 buildings have been secured by us, and then 1 of them was secured by the owner. And the 2 that were secured by us, we have paperwork in process being served on the owners and being recorded in the registry of deeds. And tonight we're here requesting that BED recommend to council to schedule a public hearing for each of these buildings. And so Brenda's gonna now take it and discuss that.
Hi, Brenda Yanscomb, Code Enforcement. So the 3 properties that we have identified at this point are 271 Elm Street, 354 Ohio Street, and 67 Lincoln Street. 271 Elm Street had a significant fire in 2023 and has been since sitting vacant. It has been secured, but it did get extensive fire damage. And there hasn't been any repairs, done to the property at this point. 354 Ohio Street had a fire in April of 2024. The property was subsequently condemned and was boarded up. It then had a second fire, I think just a few weeks later. Also a significant amount of fire damage, and part of it is starting to collapse at this point. And then 67 Lincoln Street had already been condemned in March of 2017, had some structural foundation damage, and then had a fire in December of 24. And there was a significant amount of fire damage as a result of that, has been secured by the owner. But those are the 3 properties that at this point that we have identified to move forward.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? None?
So I do have one. So basically, you're wanting us to move forward with a public hearing.
So at this point, yeah, I would move forward to go to full council to schedule a hearing at that council meeting.
Okay. In light of the work that's been done and the visual things you have here, I would. Does it have to be an actual motion or a recommendation?
The action requester is to forward the recommendation to full council.
I would move that we forward the recommendation to full council.
Second.
On these properties.
Thank you. We have a motion. We have a second. Seeing no other hands, we'll do a roll call vote.
Need to have some public comment.
Public comment.
Oh,
On the motion.
Yeah, you're welcome to come up to the field. Please state your name and whether you're a resident of Bangor, and you'll have 3 minutes. Sorry, I don't have eyes in the back of my head tonight.
I'm James, James Butler. I'm the owner of 67 Lincoln Street. Unfortunately, there was a fire back in December, the 1st of December, just three months ago, 2.5 months ago. And as you can imagine, nobody plans for a fire. And the time of year that it happened with the holidays, Christmas, New Year's, and the wintertime. The first thing I did was I reached out to some contractors, and of course, contractors typically are closed this time of year. And I also reached out to a surveyor and surveyed the property to find out where the boundaries was, so I could process what it was that needed to be done. Well, anyway, while this process was going on, I had received a letter, because it's a vacant building, about renewing. I did register the building once. And from code office, Brenda sent me a letter. She sent me a couple of letters that I had to register the building. So when she sent me the last letter about registering the building, that was in January. And I went down and spoke with her, and I pointed out to her that I said, geez, I really didn't think that I should be registering the building. I said it was, it was destroyed by fire. And she asked me what my intentions was, and that was on the 10th of January. She drafted a letter on the 6th and sent it to me, and I got, as soon as I got it, I went down and spoke with her. She asked me then, that's the first time I spoke with her about the fire, and of course, it was only like 30 days at that time. And I pointed out to her that I was planning on, I was assessing it, trying to figure out what the best plan was to, what I was gonna do with it. And she asked me, when was it gonna take action? And I said, most likely this spring, I was gonna take the building down, because it's, from my observation, it's not worth salvaging, obviously. And while I'm doing a lot of back-end work, then now I'm kind of a victim of circumstances here. I got caught in a scenario where I didn't realize there was I didn't see the agenda. I didn't realize there was a couple other buildings that was sounded like maybe a year or two ago, and mine was more recent. But anyway, I did notify DigSafe. There's a lot that goes into taking a building down. I think the water district said there's 3.5 feet of frost on the ground. There's a lot of steps that has to be taken, and there's a lot of those steps. The last signature I need is actually from, I believe it's Public Works on the sewer. I've got the water district signed off. I got the gas company signed off, Versant Power signed off. And I did apply for a permit, but she brought to my attention, I need some signatures. So I can assure you before the week's out, within the next couple of days, I'll have a permit. And I'd like to be removed from the action that you're getting ready to vote on, and be extended the courtesy of having, same as any other property owner, of taking a building down. And I will take responsibility of my property. I don't need the city to have a public hearing on it and discuss my situation.
Thank you. Your time is up. Any other council discussion?
I just have a question.
Yes.
What is the time limit that they would have if he's going to take the building down himself? Is there a limit on the time that it has to be taken down by?
So are you referring to the dangerous building
Yes.
statute? I believe that was one of the things that Grace went over, is that there is some discretion on the part, once the order is made. Then there is some discretion made, and we could work with them if they're willing to take it down, because ideally that would be what we would prefer as well. So there is some discretion there to continue to work with the property owner to ensure that it is demoed, but then we would still have that order in place should it not happen.
And Mr. Butler, what is your plan or your estimated time of demolition of that building so that it's
90 days. I actually forgive me, I actually thought at some point we had a discussion. I thought you said to me 90 days, but maybe you didn't. Maybe I got that assumption. But anyway, it's gonna, you know, when I mentioned spring, I mean, spring's obviously around the corner. It's in a couple of weeks and there's some parts of the building that I'm gonna salvage, as far as material out of there. And, to be quite honest with you, not everybody has $50,000 laying around to, demo a building like overnight. And it was unexpected, so that's where I'm at. But I had no idea that there was 2 other buildings. I really don't want the attention and I really don't want to be in a, public setting here. I really don't, but like I say, I do have all the signatures. There's a lot of back end work. Actually, you have to notify DigSafe whenever you dig in the grounds with mechanical means. And they got called on two different occasions, so they've been out there a couple of different times, all the entities. And that was because there was some location situations but a lot of this stuff that's been going on that Brenda's not aware of. But anyway, like I say, 90 days from
90
the time I
days.
get the permit, yeah.
Are there other questions for Mr. Butler? Counselor Fish?
So originally, the building was condemned in 2017, is that correct?
Yes.
And, so has it been vacant since 2017?
Yes.
So I'm just wondering, in the 7 years, why now you can do something in 90 days, but we've been 7 years and.
Well, that's a great question, but I mean, I don't really want to, this isn't an opportunity to discuss my medical history, but I spent a lot of time in the hospital and I traveled to Boston a lot. And I don't want to sound, because of the homeless problem that we have, it's really not a homeless problem. It's a drug problem in the city of Bangor. And when you have a building that has $5,000 worth of repair, and then you get a break in, it can turn into 50,000, and they go in another time, and then before you know it, it's devastating. So that's somewhat of an answer, but that's a fact.
Thank you.
Did the building need to be demolished prior to the fire?
No.
So even the structural issues could have been
Yeah,
repaired?
it was just, yes, it wasn't really, the structural issues was secured. There was a foundation wall that was pushed in, typical Bangor house, rock foundation, neighbor's driveways right next to it. The basement, over time, water falls off the roof. Frost gets in, pushes the rocks in, typical Bangor scenario. That was the only structural issue.
And once it's demolished, what are your plans for the property?
I'm still working on that.
Do you think you'll keep it or do you think it'll be up for sale?
I've got a 19-year-old daughter that's graduating from the University of Maine. She's got some ideas, so I don't know. I can't tell you.
Is this a question for Mr. Butler?
I think it's a question.
Okay, you can step back from the table. Thank you very much.
Well, we already made a motion and seconded, so can we amend it to perhaps, take Mr. Butler's property and put some guidelines on it, or?
We need to have the
Signatures.
original motion withdrawn.
I was gonna say, our recommendation was that you remain with the original motion. To Brenda's point, once we have the demolition order in hand, we can continue to work with Mr. Butler. But if we don't have the demolition order in hand and something happens and we're 90 days down, then we're gonna start this process all over again. So it's not unusual for us to get a demo order in hand. I can tell you that one of the other property owners had said, oh, well, I'm going to do something. Okay. So we just want the demo orders in hand so we can make sure that the work gets done. We will not move forward with it without working through Mr. Butler on that, but we do need these dangerous structures removed in the safe and appropriate manner, whether we do it or the homeowner does it, we really don't mind. But it will, so Grace, at the next council meeting, if this motion were to go forward, it will be in order to establish a public hearing.
Correct.
And so, and that public hearing, I'm assuming, has to have 2 weeks of is it 10 days or 14?
I don't remember if it's 10 or 14, but, MMA recommends we schedule it a month out, and so
Okay.
it'll be a month from.
Right.
from
So
this.
even if we first read it to set the public hearing date at the March 10th meeting, we wouldn't be doing a public hearing until April 14th. So I think the timeline will align.
And any time during that process.
Yeah,
If
somebody
you can
removes the
continue
building.
to work with Mr. Butler.
Correct.
and-
Or any other property owners. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion, we have a second.
Can I speak?
No, not at this time. We need to take a roll call vote. Counselor Leonard,
Yes.
Counselor Mallor,
No, I think we've been too flexible on other things. I think we could be on this. So I'll vote no.
Counselor Hawes,
Yes.
Counselor Fish,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Next item.
Yes, this is a request to offer testimony to support proposed legislation for a different expansion of the historic tax credit program. You may recall I was here last month on the historic tax credit expansion for commercial properties. This one is to allow a tax credit for residential homeowners, which is, you know, it really would be huge for historic districts in Bangor. I mean, a lot of your historic districts are in residential neighborhoods, and this really gives that incentive and that ability for people. It's very expensive to keep up a historic home, to do that preservation, rehabilitation work. So this would be really a positive change. So it's a request for permission to provide testimony and support.
Thank
I
you.
propose permission to testify for support and support.
Thank you. Motion, second. Gotta do a roll call. Counselor Leonard,
Yes.
Counselor Mallor,
Yes.
Counselor Hawes,
Yes.
Counselor Fish.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Great.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah,
Who sets the standard for historic?
it has to be on
residential
the,
property?
it either has to be in the historic district, or it has to be on the National Register, you know, because sometimes you do have properties that aren't in a
Sure.
district, but they're designated on the National Register. Yeah, and they're, the work is inspected by the state. They do come up.
Oh, yeah, I understand that. I was just
Yeah.
curious if it was, because we have a lot of historic properties that aren't in historic districts,
Correct.
that are not on the.
It would
National
only be
Register.
for National Register
Okay,
properties.
that's what I thought.
Thank you. Next item.
Yeah, next on the agenda is an overview of the city's community development block grant program. And we have our community development officer, Robin Stanicki, here to go over some slides that you should, do you want me to
Yeah, did you want to
do a share?
them up?
A share screen?
However you wanted to do that.
I think that you would just pull up the document for the meeting. It is in the documents. Oh,
Can you access the agenda on the website? I don't know if you can
oh, okay.
this way, because then you could just like go right to
Yeah.
the BED.
Right.
Oh, one up, just scroll up a little bit more. There we go.
looking for page 40. Way down. Oh, good. And if you want to
Piece
make
of
that
cake, right?
larger, you can.
Yeah.
I wonder if Joe's got vertigo.
There you go. I know, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
So this is a presentation that I often use to talk about CDBG with applicants and other folks that are interested in knowing more about the program. But I've actually adapted it to talk a little bit more with you all on some of the things that we do here and some of the things that are upcoming in our grant cycle. So the CDBG program is a HUD-funded program. And it was designed to bring funding from the federal government into local governments where there is more control and can be administered in a manner that's consistent with local priorities. And also allows local governments to apply the current context that might be location specific. It also helps folks, communities that have a reduced level of capacity to apply for grants, plan and implement long-range projects by getting money every single year to do a piece of a project over several years is sometimes an advantage to smaller communities. Next slide, I guess that's what we're doing. Okay. So the program is based on this concept of the national objective. So activities that are funded with CDBG funds must be to benefit low to moderate income residents, to eliminate slum or blighted conditions, or to address urgent needs. And in that context, the concept of urgent needs is really limited to hurricanes, other types of, natural disasters. So, what happened in, North and South Carolina, they were able to kind of invoke this use of CDBG funds. Okay. When we talk about low to moderate income, we're talking about not only the dollar value of a household's income, but there are some presumed eligibilities. So different characteristics of human beings that presume that they might also have alibi. So things like being of a certain age, being an unaccompanied minor really is talking about homeless youth. So things like that. You wanna go there? So thinking about those national objectives, we also talk about the directives of CDBG related to why it exists. And it exists to strengthen communities through the provision of decent housing, to establish and maintain suitable living environments, and to expand economic opportunities. And under each of these categories, you have those same national objectives that we just talked about and kind of how they filter through. So in decent housing, you can also think about it in terms of slum and blight. If you have, residential structures that are, vacant for an overly length of time or, that kind of thing. Living environments also relate to the type of services that are provided, within the community, slum and blighted property, and then, thinking about an area that would be served for low and moderate income people. Expanding economic opportunities relates to, LMI owned businesses, which are also called micro enterprises, if anyone has ever heard that term around. And so that's a low to moderate income, business owner. And the business, has 5 or fewer employees. Okay. So I broke this out so that you could see a little bit more of a historical context about what types of projects have been typically funded in the past. So you can see some of the work that's been done around Bangor. So decent housing is actually statutorily defined, has to be an adequate size, so to address overcrowding. It needs to be appropriate for household needs, so sometimes this will mean architectural barriers for persons with mobility issues. Again, accessible in design. It should be affordable, and it should also meet local building codes, so it should be safe. This is a photo representing the Housing Rehabilitation Loan Program. Also worked within specific neighborhoods to target funding consistently. That was used as part of like the neighborhood stabilization program. This is the West Side Village Revitalization Project. So that area got a lot of funding over a certain number of years. So they did a lot of work over there. We've also done projects related to increasing home ownership rates. This is another one of those strategies to address housing affordability. If more families are able to choose home ownership as a housing option, then you might see more market play. Historically, low to moderate income families have struggled to find a home that is within their budget that they can purchase, that doesn't include a lot of work to be done to it. So first-time home buyers are able to work with their lenders, and there's different benefits that they can get to help qualify for a loan. And so that brings them closer to home ownership. Once you own a home, or if you do already, one of the more popular programs that we've done is working with heat pumps and home energy audits to try to find savings for energy consumers. This is one of the biggest costs of owning a home is needing to heat or cool it. So we have agreements with different vendors in the area, and we work with Efficiency Maine. So homeowners can get an energy audit. They find out what the best use of different improvements would be and how they might be able to get their electricity bill down or use less oil, and then they can make a good choice for something like that. We also have in the annals of the CDBG project sort of history, we've seen that many projects in our downtown location prioritize accessibility, safety, and design. This is a photo of course, the waterfront. A lot of CDBG funds went into the waterfront area. Many years, there was a budget line item for waterfront improvements. There's also street and sidewalk construction that happens yearly, public facilities, and then park and playgrounds. So kind of every park that the city has had some type of improvements that have been used with CDBG. One of the things that I touched on earlier is those living environments can also be affected by slum and blight. So these are the types of projects that relate to slum and blight, historical or significant elements in architecture. We renovate storefronts, eliminating toxic or hazardous substances, and then repairing or replacing broken or obsolete building features. For many years, we have had some semblance of a downtown facade improvement program. And we've done so much work in the downtown that it is not by HUD standards considered to be blighted. So that's some really good news, so. In our living environments, we also think about the services that are available to people. So these types of services elevate the quality of life for low to moderate income individuals. And this might be something that increases their access to a service. And it also has many other benefits, including reducing isolation, revitalizing neighborhoods, restoring historical properties, and then also conserving energy. And this is just a photo representing that our paratransit program was partially funded with CDBG. The economic opportunities that are typically funded with CDBG are used to create or retain jobs. And those jobs provide opportunities for credentialing. The focus is on fair wages because the point of, supporting people with low to moderate income is that they will eventually not be low to moderate income, so that they have the opportunity to, work at a good job and be able to have advancement and things like that. There's also education programs, promoting small business ownership, and then supporting businesses that also provide goods and services for those residents in a defined service area. So an example of this would be a small grocer that's in an area where you might not be able to necessarily walk home with your groceries if it's, all the way on the other side of town. So citing a small grocer in that area could be an eligible activity. So the planning process for the grant really centers around what's called the action plan. The consolidated action plan is a long-range strategic planning document. And this is developed over many, many rounds of public engagement and really understanding what the community needs, what the state of, different issues are within the community. So there's a lot of data that's collected and analyzed, and that is all used to try to arrive at certain priorities. And it's ideal when those priorities are also sort of gathered and are synergistic with some of our other plans, like our comprehensive plan and all of the other the plans that affect our community, like the just the other plans. I can't think of one, like the housing production plan was what I was going to say. So whenever we can use plans that have already written and find out what we need to know, this is what will go into the consolidated plan. So we use our data. We conduct a market analysis that's largely about housing, but also facilities and all the other assets that the city may own and use to meet those goals. We develop a strategic plan that encompasses the priorities and goals that are articulated by the public. And then we create 5 individual action plans over that 5 years of that strategic plan. And then we evaluate how we're doing with that by gathering data to try to compare to see where we are after 5 years. So right now, we are currently developing the 2025 to 29 consolidated plan. This is our consolidated plan calendar. We have been working on the public outreach aspect of this since last fall. So we've had some neighborhood meetings, community surveys. We're actually working with the Bangor School Department right now. The high school students are developing a survey of their peers that's going to be administered to the middle schools. And it's on topics that they don't normally get asked. Things like, how are the sidewalks on your way to school? You know, things like that. So we will have a public workshop where this plan will be released in draft form. And then we have a 30-day comment period where, you know, people review the plan, they tell us what they think. And then we bring it back to the city council, and there are 2 public hearings. We then go back to a revised public comment period so they can see the changes that might have occurred as a result of those public hearings. And then it goes back to the council for approval, and then we send that on to HUD, and they review that and they approve it. And that is it. That is all of it. So, does anyone have any specific questions about the program? I know.
Oh, it's very informative. It's pretty
Slides are good.
multifaceted.
Good slides.
Okay,
Right.
thank you, Robin.
My only question is, I know we've had HUD make some changes in terms of programming in the last few weeks. Anything new coming down the road that we should know about, and changes in this program or others that maybe council's not aware of yet? So we're prepared to adapt to a variety of funding scenarios. In discussing this sort of with people that are familiar with this funding landscape, I've been told that CDBG funding in particular is going to be stable, at least for the next budget cycle. But we're monitoring the situation to make sure that, you know, any effects from cuts in other areas, see the effects of in our program. But other than that, I think the changes that we would see are mostly logistical in nature and won't be particularly onerous, I think. Okay. Good news. Don't see any other hands. Thank you.
All right.
For the update. Appreciate it.
Robin. So next
Last
on,
item?
next on the agenda is we're gonna hear an update on the economic development activities from Brigitte Hernandez Smith, who is our economic development officer.
Hi, everyone.
Good evening.
Honored to close the evening.
I know. Last but not least, for sure.
So I am with Jennifer Gutherman. I have on 1 month of probation, and I started this thing April 1st, and it has been a year. I wanted to put this into the context of really creating the groundwork and the foundation and building upon it as we are in the year of building. And it makes complete sense. The economic development team has been established. The new economic development team has been established for the last year. And we had to do a balance of hitting the ground running, but also understanding the breadth of our responsibilities and the work that we needed to do. Our tools were the 2022 Economic Development Strategic Plan and Guidance. Like I said, really trying to understand and connect the dots with all that we manage. And then also the rule of thumb was being accessible and being a very consistent presence in our community. Because there's no way we can do the work that we do without understanding and hearing the challenges, the concerns of our residents. And so we did that. The first topic is community engagement and business support. I'm very happy to report that it seems that we are the first stop to our international and local businesses who are interested in receiving support from us, which is great and a real big turnaround from where we started. So while Brad and I do not provide direct service, we have a plethora of business partners that do. That being the SBDC, our Workforce Career Center, SCORE, just to name a few. So, but the thing is that it's important that our businesses understand that we're here for them. And if they're interested in coming to our city, we can talk about our great community. We can talk about the benefits of being in the city and then direct them to our partners. Now, building upon that, it's really important. I'm a proponent for measurement, metrics and measurement. And so we didn't necessarily have the luxury of doing that because we really had to create kind of a framework of how we did our work. Building upon supporting our local businesses, we will better manage and make our partners more accountable, following through on the businesses that we see. How many businesses do we see on a weekly basis? What are those industries? What are their needs? Who did we refer them to? And then ultimately following them through so that we can understand the impact that we make. Moving on to expanding our business ecosystem. So I had mentioned this before in this meeting that it's important to while we're a local consistent presence, it's also important to be at the table for out of state and international discussions as well. And so we did a great job of that. Bringing the Bangor region, our city of Bangor, to the table and having these very deep discussions. And it's important that in economic development, Ann and I always talk about the fact that it's a long game. And in order to make it a shorter game, it's important that we understand that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, that oftentimes our national and international partners have done this work and we can lean on those best practices. Also, while promoting our city as a destination place. Just to name a few, so we are connected to the International Economic Development Council. I have just been asked to be on the international committee of that. So we just had our first meeting this year, which was really powerful. It was a virtual room of national and international leaders. Those leaders consisted of Canadian leaders as well, speaking about how we can support them, their concerns, and how do we kind of mitigate those concerns. And then just so that you know, from a local perspective, I am now on the board for the Chamber of Commerce. I am on the board for Upstart Maine and Green Drinks. So all business support, but kind of different ways and different arenas of business support. Brad is on Big Gig, and he's been doing a fine job with that, just being able to coordinate and help with the logistics of hearing our local businesses and kind of supporting them in their business plan. Educational partnerships. So I remember this was a big question in my interview. How do we get a better partnership with the University of Maine? And so from my perspective at the time, I said, I don't understand. It's just up the road, but I get it now, and I get the positioning of the entities. I'm happy to say that we have a significant, relationship with both the University of Maine and Husson. Just to name a few things. So I was a guest lecturer for the School of International Policy and Affairs, as well as practicing our objective of inclusivity and being a keynote speaker for Hispanic Heritage Month. We also sponsored African American Month last month. I wasn't able to attend, but we sponsored just because of personal reasons, but we definitely sponsored that. And we will continue to support our marginalized communities and embrace diversity within our city. with Hudson, and we have been present with career fairs, really being able to talk to the students about what it means to be a public servant, specifically in economic and community development. And I'm really, really excited to say that we're about to launch our inaugural economic development internship with both UMaine and Hudson, local and international students, and that internship will be housed or hosted at the Bangor Innovation Center. Now, we know that the Bangor Innovation Center, from an aesthetic perspective, needs definite support, and we plan to do that. That's again in the year of building. However, I thought it was awesome to have our students be a midst of business operations, right? And just be upfront and up close and personal with our business, while they help us kind of leverage the work that we do. And so just to speak a little bit about that, I want in the intention of this internship is to be broad, right? So obviously Brad and I are two people. We can really utilize the resources of top talent to be able to leverage our systems and create more of a foundation, right? So we did all this great work. Now we need to hone it in and build systems around it. But also we understand that we need to increase and encourage our student pipeline to be retained in this region. And so oftentimes we do that by introducing career opportunities to them. So we have both undergrad and graduate business students who will be hosted for 6 weeks. And we have a great, because in the past, when I've entertained interns, you got to pick the right interns because it could be a burden if that intern is not engaged. And so we recently had an economic development roundtable where we wanted to tap into the mindset of these interns, and they are sharp and they're going to hit the ground running and they have great ideas. So it's important that it's twofold. It's a reciprocal relationship. We're giving them the opportunity to understand what it means to be a public servant, to work in a municipality specific to economic development, but also giving them a great experience to remember. Funding success. So I believe that everyone around the table knows that we successfully got funded $500,000 for the central kitchen by the Northern Border, forgive me because it's late at night, NBRC. And it's fantastic and we're really happy about that. However, that central kitchen is a priority project, and it's important that we continue to build our capital stack. And our capital stack being, and we can't put everything in federal just because we know that we shouldn't at this time. We need to get really creative in utilizing and applying for federal dollars, as well as some creative public-private partnerships. So still a priority, but we do need additional funding. And the next step in that is being strategic with Carolyn Paris. If you guys remember, she did our feasibility study for a central kitchen as well as our operational study. She helped us with grant writing. So we want to be kind of strategic with her and utilizing her talent, as well as our in-house talent of Charles McGinnis, who is our grant writer. So we'll be meeting this week to kind of strategize around what's next and how do we continue to build our funding for our central kitchen. Trade development. So foreign trade zone, great timing. So when I came, foreign trade zone was something of interest to me. I wanted to ensure that we utilized it. It was a benefit that the city of Bangor had. Foreign trade zone number 58. At this time, it becomes very timely. So in the last year, we worked to really build the partnerships around our foreign trade zone, understanding it and building the knowledge and being trained, and activating it from a standpoint of we are now actively overseeing it. We are going to be faced as a country with upcoming tariffs. And so the foreign trade zone seems to be a program where we can mitigate those for our local businesses. So next step is working with MITC, our Maine International Trade Center, to understand who our importers are and exporters are at the city of Bangor, reaching out to them and understanding the challenges that they will have with their supply chain, and how do we go about mitigating those with our foreign trade zone benefits. Any questions so far? Okay, workforce development. We are at the table with workforce development. Again, not a direct service of ours, but we are on the Working Communities Committee, which this was a grant funded by the Boston Federal Reserve, or facilitated by the Boston Federal Reserve. At this table includes our city counterparts. So I am at the table representing the city of Bangor, as well as the city of Orono, and Old Town is at our table as well. And we're trying to understand kind of workforce development, the challenges around it, and how can we strategize to there's nothing new to reinvent, but what do we need to do to poke holes to make it better? And so we've been doing that for the last year, constantly thinking about new opportunities, how we curtail and pivot in different areas. EMDC has been at that table as well. Happy to say that we did a fine job. We just got funded an additional $150,000 to, we proposed 2 programs. One is a workforce program. Oftentimes we understand that there's obstacles that are related to actually obtaining employment. One of those big obstacles that we heard loud and clear was transportation. So we proposed a transportation program that would help with driver's ed education, as well as create a fund for those ancillary needs around driving. So that being a vehicle, or tires, or gas, or things like that. The other program that we proposed was so childcare is another obstacle for workforce development, right? I need childcare, I can't get to my job. So we proposed a program around funding for educators, so folks to become teachers or teachers' assistants or childcare professionals. And so that's what we proposed to the Boston Federal Reserve. They loved it. And so now it's about taking that $150,000, working for the next year, and trying to scale that where we no longer have to rely on the funding of the grant, but we now utilize our partners to make these programs work on a grander scale. Questions?
It's really exciting.
Yes, very exciting. International relations. So we had a business to business roundtable with our Canadian businesses last year, a few months ago. And so the next step to that was the first of its kind here at the city of Bangor. We hosted it at the University of Maine. Those businesses, again, at the time that we hosted that, the idea of supply chains and all of that was not a challenge just yet, but now that they know each other, they're having those more intimate conversations of, again, how do we mitigate these supply chain challenges? Property development. So we now know exactly the properties that we are responsible for. That was a big to-do, and kind of a available city-owned properties, and also Ban-Air properties. We know them, we know the tenants, and we are servicing them in terms of a maintenance standpoint. I presented you a presentation about kind of understanding where those are: Main Enterprise Business Park, our industrial park, and kind of understanding the industries that would go into those different areas. Again, to have a proactive plan. Obviously, we want to attract business, so we want to be flexible in our thoughts, but we definitely want to have a proactive plan. I'm happy to say that so this is going to be in the next bed committee meeting, but we need to be a little bit more strategic with our real estate commercial development representative, right? It's one thing to have our properties on their website. It's another thing to be able to have discussions around how do we strategically promote and who will we promoting to? One of the great developments now, and I can't disclose the businesses' names because they asked to be confidential, but there's two international businesses that we are courting to come to the city of Bangor, and Bangor is their number one choice. We all are familiar with our mall redevelopment. I think, on a broad perspective, it's safe to, from a broad perspective and not to get into the weeds. I think we did a great job, being persistent in our engagement to make NAMDAR accountable. And so on the other side of that, we are starting to have productive conversations around them being a community player and what the mall could actually look like. And those are new discussions, and they're beginning, but they're discussions that never was had, and I think that's great in terms of progress. Let's take a deep breath. So those are, for the most part, developments that are happening with the economic development team. It's important, and I want to make it kind of a rule of thumb to come see you on a bi-weekly basis. The work we do is very detailed, it's very exciting, it's very progressive, and I want to make sure that all of you know and are aware of what we're doing. Something to come is, I don't know if you remember, it's National Economic Development Week, so that'll happen in May. Last year we had a great partnership with Waterfront Concerts. And so we'll pick another community partner to do kind of a collaboration around small business. So last year we did it around workforce development challenges. This year we're going to focus on how do we go about retaining our small businesses.
Questions
Any
or comments?
questions?
Yes, Councilor Fish.
Hi, just
Not
listening.
speaking.
I mean, that's amazing, what you've done in a year and, I mean, this report. I think seeing you more often, because to have you come in last and kind of try to run through this, amazing. More details would be interesting, you know, just, maybe if this was broken up and we saw you more, because, you guys are doing a fantastic job. This is all exciting. And, yeah, more updates would be wonderful. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. It's been great work, and just the turnaround. As I mentioned, economic development is a long game, but I believe that the city of Bangor is out of all of the cities I've worked in, very close-knit, very supportive, and I'm able to see the impact quicker than any other city that I've worked in. It's a really great community. But yes, if it's not every bed committee meeting, we'll have an update, because there's a lot of updates. It'll be every other bed committee meeting.
That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Councilor
Yes.
Bean?
What are your thoughts on retention of small businesses? What
So
come up with that might be new and?
yeah, so we definitely need an army of partners to help us with that. But it was disheartening to see several businesses downtown that closed its doors. And my experience in small business nationally is that oftentimes our small businesses have a passion about their product and their service, but they don't necessarily have the business acumen to run the business. And oftentimes the challenge is finance and operations, right? They just don't know their business in that way. The other piece of the experience that I have with small businesses is that it's hard. You have to build the trust and you have to build a relationship for them to let you in. So I think we talked about a campaign where we literally have feet on the ground, introducing ourselves. And when I say we, not only the economic development team, but all of our partners, saying this is what we can do for you. So not only being at the ribbon cutting, but following that up with these are our services and being consistent in our visits to them, so that ultimately they are okay with opening their doors and they come to us before they close their doors. That's the most important part.
Counselor Leonard?
I just want to take note of that, the statement that you ended on. That's exactly what I've always envisioned the city of Bangor to be able to do with its, micro businesses and small businesses in the area. Just leaving our entrepreneurs at the grand opening door and then not being with them through the process, the second day to the 700th day, just keeping tabs on them, making sure that opportunities are available to them. I know that there are some large municipalities that are a bit more organized with their economic development that are able to do that reach out. I'm happy to see that it looks like Bangor's BED is starting to take those steps into that position because, like you said, it's always very disheartening to see a lot of people put their hard work and effort into these local businesses just to end abruptly because either the passion's gone or too many other stresses came on that sort of forced them into a predicament to end their enterprise. And being able to have more city programs for these entrepreneurs to interact with at the city, it's just a win-win situation for us. So I just want to thank you for that statement. That's exactly how we retain businesses in Bangor.
Absolutely. I don't think we need to take any
No.
action on this.
No action.
Anything else on the agenda?
Nothing on the agenda.
Wonderful. Thank you all. We are adjourned.